Hey there, everybody. How's it going? Welcome back to another episode of Kickback Comics. My name is Antonio.
My name is Ben, and you guys are listening to a comic book podcast.
By two dudes who have not read a lot of comics in their lives, but are looking to get involved, read some good stories, look at some beautiful art, and experience a world of emotion.
Yeah, all that stuff. Comics is our new hobby, and you guys are joining us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. We are talking about, what are we talking about today, Ben?
We're talking about Watchmen.
Watchmen.
We are digging in. We've really tried our best to not have in-depth conversations about this yet.
Which is pretty hard.
Yeah, it's hard. Like we were literally setting up the mics and just sort of prepping for the episode, and trying to get our stuff together. And
it's hard not to talk about. And I mean, the thing for me is with how much. I don't know if it's necessarily a lot, but it's like more than maybe people know. But like, there was a Watchmen movie. There's been multiple TV shows. I have not seen any of it. I have not read any of it, and so this is my first experience with Watchmen in general.
Yeah, dude, I'm super excited for you to be reading this for the first time.
Yeah,
I have read Watchmen before, and I liked it so much. I had my little brother read it. I sort of like skimmed back through it again or whatever when he was doing that. But this is my second real reread. And I also, I have seen the movie. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen the HBO show though. So that's like new frontier for both of us. But anyways, Watchmen is way more familiar to me than it is to you.
Yes.
And I'm psyched that we're going to get to talk about it together.
Yeah, absolutely. Watchmen. So Watchmen is written by Alan Moore, illustrated, and the illustrator and letterer also is Dave Gibbons, and then the color artist is John Higgins, and I guess overall created by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. But I mean, I feel like with even just a couple of comics that we've read so far, obviously there are a lot of other people behind the scenes, but really a tight team to put together this comic off rip.
Oh yeah, Alan Moore is one of the like iconic comic book writers. Mm-hmm. Also, he did V for Vendetta, which was another like big movie and also pretty political story.
I've seen V for Vendetta.
So that's Alan Moore.
Wow.
So that's why there's some
wow.
There's some energy there. Energy in common or whatever.
Yeah.
Like most of the comics that we've read so far, Watchmen was published one issue at a time, starting in 1987. And it ran for 12 issues. Yeah, let's see. First issue was released in September of 1986, and the final issue was in October of 1987. And it was then collected into a single volume graphic novel in 1987 as well.
Right, and that's the one that we're reading. We're reading the compiled version, but we've got every issue along the way.
So I guess just off rip, what are your thoughts? What do you think, dude?
What a crazy, interesting, exciting, depressing story this is. I mean, I feel like one of the things that I feel like has been so hard for you and me to not just like dive super deep into like constantly is just like how many weird, morbidly hilarious parallels there are between what's happening in this story and obviously what's happening. This is kind of like obviously referencing a lot of stuff in like the 60s and 70s and obviously 80s too, but with the Cold War, Vietnam War, whatever else, all this kind of stuff going on, all the parallels with what's going on today. Yeah,
it's a very political story, and you're absolutely right. It's super crazy relevant.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. I mean, I think that like that was one of the things that I think really stuck out to me kind of immediately was that it really is not afraid at all to kind of jump into being political off the rip. And I mean, we can just dive into the first issue here, but
so I'll jump in a little bit.
Yeah.
The way we're thinking about going about this right now, guys, is we're going to talk about the first 3 chapters this episode. We don't know exactly how many we'll chunk at a time. I think we'll sort of figure out what makes sense as we go.
Yep.
But we're going to talk through the story a couple chapters at a time, and then maybe have like one culminating episode where we talk about all of it or whatever, and dive more into details, whatever specific stuff we find interesting. But for right now, this episode is going to be chapters 1 through 3. I think we should just kick off with like really brief summary of chapter 1, and then we can talk about them generally, but try to run through them like chapter at a time. I think is a cool idea.
I think that makes sense.
So, all right, here we go. So chapter 1, at midnight, all the agents, ... So basically, the story kicks off with a murder. A man is thrown out of a high-rise apartment window. And we find out pretty quickly that it was Edward Blake, who used to be a costumed government agent called the Comedian. So police investigate. They don't do a very good job. But
they don't know what's going on.
Yeah, they have no idea. But then Rorschach, who's one of the last masked vigilantes, superhero type guys, who's still active, he pulls up, starts digging deeper, and uncovers.
Well, he's the one who actually figures out that it's the Comedian. The cops are just bumbling around there being like, dang, this guy's dead, whatever else, right? Rorschach shows up. He's like fumbling around in like the closet, hits a button, and then obviously all this.
And he's not even fumbling. He
knows what he's looking for.
Yeah, bro. He also it's so sick, the intro too, visually, because these cops, it's exactly what Antonio's saying. Like the cops clearly don't know what they're doing. They're like, oh, pretty big guy to get thrown out a window. Oh, wonder what's going on. And it's got all this dialogue, right? Cut to Rorschach pulling up in complete silence, dead of night, goes up the side of the building with a grappling hook, which is pretty wild. And this is the first time we sort of get a look at what Rorschach looks like.
Yep.
He's pretty terrifying looking.
He's a terrifying dude, and Rorschach, right, is this obviously the references to like the Rorschach ink blot tests and things like that from psychology, where it was all about and we'll probably get into like what his face looks like throughout all of this, right? But it's like, all these different ink blots that are supposed to elicit like different emotions, and whatever it is that you kind of derive from the ink blot was at the time at least supposed to kind of say something about your psychology or your mental state or whatever else.
Yeah. And then the rest of his outfit is kind of like a exaggerated noir detective jacket, hat. But with that freaky face underneath. But yeah, so anyways, he grappling hooks up into the apartment, finds the hidden superhero costume, which is kind of like a Captain America costume.
Right, that was the first thing that it made me think of too, right? Yeah, you've got the stripes and blue and star and whatever it's like a Captain America like gimp costume. That's almost what it looks like.
That's what it looks like hanging in the closet for sure.
Yeah.
It's wild. So basically, Rorschach visits the apartment, starts digging deeper, starts uncovering some clues, and then he goes one by one and visits a bunch of people from his former superhero life. Mm-hmm. So first he visits Dan Dryberg. He used to be a hero called Night Owl. This Night Owl is kind of like a Batman type of guy, his version of it at least. And he and Rorschach, we find out, used to be like a duo. They were worked as partners for a while. Rorschach also then checks in with Adrian Vett. He's another former hero turned into a high-profile businessman. Neither of the first two people he visits take what he's saying very seriously. Nobody really.
They also like have. I mean, you get this such like interesting kind of understand, basic understanding, but this understanding of the relationship. Like when he goes to visit Dan Dryberg first. Dan's like, I mean, he seems like a nervous guy in general, but he's like, Rorschach shows up and he's just like, yeah, man, like whatever you want to do. And it's funny, like Rorschach, I feel like we get this little other like thing from him because he takes all of the sugar cubes from Dan's house. He like empties all of them into his pocket or whatever else.
Yeah, he also so Dan. The way we see this is Dan is visiting the previous Night Owl,
right? Which
he does, I think, on like a weekly basis. I guess the original Night Owl, Dan took over for him, which we'll get more into that in a minute. But he gets home and Rorschach is just eating cold beans out of a can in his kitchen.
And it's just like, you want me to heat those up? And he's like, no. I want them just like this. He's like, he's
a freaky guy.
He like causes like his own suffering, I feel like, in a lot of ways. Like he's just a very melancholy dude. But this is kind of like their first interaction that we at least get to see. And then like Ben was saying, he goes and visits Adrian, is it Vett?
Yeah,
Vett, right?
I think
but this guy's like, he's in this like big high rise. He's this big businessman, former costumed hero, who he's very polished, he's composed, and he's also like he's skeptical about what Rorschach is saying, or kind of just being like, is this really what's happening?
Yeah, basically Rorschach thinks that somebody is hunting down former heroes, former masked vigilantes. We got all these different, phrases for what people used to call them. But people are after him. Rorschach believes.
Right, exactly. And we also get kind of a bit of his, later on we get a bit of his journal, which we can get into as well. But Rorschach is basically trying to look around. He's trying to find information and also obviously warn all the other vigilantes, costume heroes, whatever it is that you want to call them. But he's trying to warn all of them.
Next person he goes to see is not a costumed vigilante.
No.
He's the one that's super different. He goes to see Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan is the only person we've seen so far who has some legit superpowers.
Yep.
Everybody else is kind of just a guy in a costume.
Everybody else is like a hero, and this is like a super hero for
and
real.
We find out he's sort of an analogy for nuclear weaponry in general. He's called Dr. Manhattan because of the Manhattan Project, obviously. Basically, in this timeline, instead of just coming up with nukes, a side effect of that was Dr. Manhattan appeared.
Yep.
And he is just super overpowered. He just can sort of shift matter at will.
When you first see him, he's like 30 feet tall, right? Like, Rorschach walks in there and this guy's like 30 feet tall, and then you also
he's also, we haven't said explicitly, he's blue and naked pretty much the entire time. He's this enormous blue naked guy.
Yep, exactly. And so Dr. Manhattan's in this kind of like government. So basically Rorschach sneaks into this government facility, which is where Dr. Manhattan is, and he's with his partner, Lori Uspech, I believe her name is.
Yeah, I got nothing for you.
And so she was basically this hero called the Silk Spectre. And we kind of, one of the things that we get that's kind of interesting is their relationship, which, Manhattan is this, Dr. Manhattan is this like we were saying, blue guy, super powerful, which is just makes this kind of interesting dynamic between him and Lori, who's this kind of, yes, she's obviously like a vigilante and hero like the rest of them, but this guy is like on a totally different level. And one of the other things is that before Rorschach even gets to to meeting them, he goes into this bar. I feel like we get a lot of really interesting backstory on him, which is that he goes in this bar where you kind of expect like quote unquote like seedy characters, but he walks in and everybody's like, oh shit, like
terrified.
Terrified of him. And he goes in like asking for information on this guy who died, Edward Blake. And he just starts like breaking this dude's fingers who like says something about him. Yeah.
Snapping fingers.
And everybody's like, please leave. Like, please go away. And luckily he eventually does. But you kind of get this like little intro into his psyche that he's just like a real life crazy person in addition to being a hero, I guess. Or a vigilante maybe is really just the best way to describe it. And so throughout this whole chapter, we obviously get introduced to a couple of the people from this group, but we also learn that ever since 1977, there was this thing called the Keene Act, which is basically this idea that the government decided that all of these vigilantes, all these heroes, they're no longer allowed, I guess is the simple thing. Obviously, since Dr. Manhattan still is in a government facility, they said, except for you, brother, you can hang around and, we'll use whatever power you've got, but everybody else is done.
Right. So this is kind of reminiscent of a really big event in Marvel Comics, which probably is somewhat based on this, which is Civil War, which eventually got adapted into a Avengers movie, or I guess technically a Captain America movie from when we were younger. But in that storyline, basically all of the different, there's the Barovia Accords, I think is what it's called, something like that. But basically all of the Marvel heroes have to cede some kind of control over what they do to the government. And in the comics, people have to reveal their secret identities if they have them. And I think Peter Parker really famously is one of the first heroes to reveal that he's Spider-Man. Or I guess Spider-Man's the first hero to reveal that he's Peter Parker. Yeah. Same, what's the difference? But this is, sort of the OG telling of that. And the government, we're going to find out more about it as we read and go on in further chapters. But yeah, the government shut down superheroes and only allowed the ones that were willing to sort of work for the government to continue.
Yep, exactly.
One thing that we can sort of jump in and clarify here is there was an original generation of heroes that we get introduced to before the Keene Act. This was sort of when masked vigilantes were first popping up. And one of those is Hollis Mason, the original Night Owl. We see in the comic full excerpts from his biography,
Yep.
which is super cool. And it's not just in panels; it's in full text. We get like 3 or 4 pages.
Yeah, you're
at a
really
time.
reading a book inside of the comic book itself, which
Right.
is a super cool kind of Inception medium situation.
So this was part of the original team of the Minutemen, which is sort of the
Right.
Avengers when they come together. The Comedian is one of them. The original Silk Spectre is one of them. Eventually, Dr. Manhattan becomes one of them. There's like a moth guy. There's an
Right,
interesting
yeah.
cast of characters, right? Then there's sort of later on a new generation crop of heroes that pop up that were inspired by the originals, and that is like the Rorschach generation,
Right,
this
exactly.
Dan generation, this Laurie, the second
Silk Spectre, yeah.
So you were just about to say something about
Yeah, well, I was going to say what I think is like a really interesting kind of conversation between all of them, right? You kind of see, basically, you end up learning that the comedian, who's this guy Edward Blake, and it's kind of interesting because you start this story kind of like, I don't know if you necessarily like feel sorry for him, but you're like, somebody was murdered, that's probably sucks. We feel bad for them, right? And then you end up learning from
we do see him get. I just went back and looked too. We see him getting beat
panels
up
beat up and then thrown out the window. Yeah, like so it's like you kind of like obviously you haven't had the whole story told to you, but you through the panels that have like at least don't have dialogue like, directly to them, you learn that yes, he was like absolutely murdered. But the interesting thing is that you end up learning between this conversation between Laurie and Rorschach that the comedian, this guy Edward Blake, who we just saw get murdered or whatever else in this flashback, assaulted Laurie's mom back when they were in the group together. And the interesting thing that you get from this is that Laurie, obviously rightfully so, cares about this and is like, she's kind of like, yeah, well, good riddance to like that dude and whatever else.
And they kicked him out of the group.
Right.
But you find out like he got forced out of the group because he assaulted
the Silk Spectre. The
Silk
first
Spectre.
Silk Spectre, yeah.
Right. And who came in? One of the one who wears like a noose around his neck. The original one. That
He's the
everybody.
original
He's the OG
hero, yeah.
He came in and stopped it and like beat up the comedian.
Yeah, which is a pretty great scene, beating his ass. But the thing that I feel like is really interesting about that conversation, though, is that you get that Laurie obviously cares. Rorschach calls it like a lapse in moral judgment. That's what he calls. He's like, oh, I'm not here to, I'm here to figure out why he died, not talk about a man's lapse in moral judgment. Right. So you get this idea of like who Rorschach is, how intense he is about, I guess, being like a vigilante, but also like he has these really interesting, and we'll talk about this more, so but he has this really interesting like moral code where it's like very intense, but
super intense,
split in some weird ways. And then you also have obviously Dr. Manhattan in the background who, as we talked about before, this all-powerful kind of being who's very kind of like detached from this extremely emotional conversation. But I just felt like that's like, it's a very interesting way to be introduced to all three of those characters in a very intense way.
Oh, totally. It's super intense. I loved everything you just said. There's a few different things that you just made me think of. One thing that's super interesting is we're getting so many different perspectives on the comedian, like this guy who's dead now. We are also he's a super nuanced character. He seems, in some of the stories, he seems absolutely terrible. In chapter 2, we end up actually seeing the flashback of where he assaults the Silk Spectre. And he does, like, he's not a good guy. He's sort of a terrible guy.
Yeah.
But everybody, Rorschach respects the work that he did in a weird way. And then even when Laurie's talking to her own mom about it, her mom sort of downplays all of it and says, oh, you'll have different perspectives as you grow up. Nothing is black and white. Everything is so much more confusing than that. Which seems kind of ridiculous because in a way it feels like she's trying to not justify, but
like you said, downplay
her getting assaulted.
Right. But you also get this interesting moment where she's in this, and I feel like this is like something that I think also like contributes to, in a lot of ways, obviously this is like a supernatural story in some ways, but the very like real aspect of this is like she says all this and she's like, you grow older, things change, blah, whatever else. But then the flashback that we get, and when we see this whole situation happening, is like her flashback in her mind. And you have this moment where she kind of like snaps back after remembering it, and you're like, yeah, she just said that it's like water over the bridge, but it is like in a very real way, it's absolutely not.
So you know, I'll talk a little bit about Rorschach and Night Owl. One thing that is super cool about them that I, maybe this isn't like canon, but I definitely feel like they sort of are, Alan Moore is using them as two different parts of Batman. Like Night Owl represents sort of the tech. His costume looks like a Batman costume, number one. He's got like the, tech belt with all these gadgets. He has a cowl and a cape.
His Owlmobile.
Owl, yeah, exactly. He's got like a flying ship. And then Rorschach is this super driven, detective noir guy who is willing to just absolutely beat people up.
Right, do anything to get what he...
Super, like, way more violent than, we get a feeling that Dan...
Right,
they're very different characters. And they sort of represent two different parts of Batman. And we know that they used to work together as a team in, like, their heyday. They were a duo. So that's sort of an interesting context. Another interesting Rorschach characterization, right, that we get... Well, okay, let me take a step back. So in the plot, right... Going back to our sort of walkthrough of the timeline here, Rorschach goes to visit Dr. Manhattan and Laurie. He tells them, I think people are getting murdered one by one. Mm-hmm. We need to be ready for this. You guys got to look out. They sort of dismiss it. Then Laurie goes and has dinner with Dan.
Right.
Because she's bored in the lab hanging out with Dr. Manhattan.
Well, she's just like, this dude is locked in on his science stuff and whatever else, and he right. We're talking about, this dude can kind of we learn more about this later, but he can kind of just do whatever he wants. He's detached.
And so we get these two different things, right? We have Rorschach's journal, which is a huge device here that we get. Basically most of what we're reading is people's dialogue, and then we get this real narration from Rorschach. It's got his journal entries, and it is dark. It's messed up. He's like, on Friday night, the comedian died in New York. Someone threw him out of a window, and when he hit the sidewalk, his head was driven up into his stomach. Nobody cares but me. He's just such an edgelord. It's crazy.
He's an edgelord.
He's like walking through his filth, and he's like, oh, the city is filthy, filled with homosexuals and prostitutes.
Yeah, he's so there's a word I'm looking for, but he's there's a better word for this, but he's just super negative. Like he's like, he feels like the world is like collapsing. Like all of morality and all of civilization, all of society is kind of collapsing in upon itself.
Right. And he says here, soon there will be war, millions will burn, millions will perish in sickness and misery. Why does one death matter against so many? Because there is good and there is evil, and evil must be punished, even in the face of Armageddon. I shall not compromise in this. There are so many deserving of retribution, and there is so little time. Right. Versus we see basically everybody else is talking about gray, spectrum, all this stuff, conflicted characterization. Then we get Rorschach. Rorschach is just telling us straight up,
like there's
black and white, there's good and evil.
And if there's evil, that shit's got to be eradicated.
So then we jump from Rorschach to Dan and Laurie's evening. They're having like a great dinner. They're reminiscing. They're in like the Manhattan skyline or whatever. And then this was one conversation I thought was interesting, where they're reminiscing about a guy who used to sort of maybe get off on getting caught by the superheroes. Right. And they're saying, okay, let's see. He tried that with me, and I heard about it, and I just walked away. He followed me down the street in broad daylight, right? He's saying, punish me. I'm saying, no, get lost. Whatever happened to him, says Laurie. And then Dan says, well, he pulled it on Rorschach, and Rorschach dropped him down an elevator shaft.
Yeah, Rorschach is a crazy dude.
And then they laugh about it. So it's like the people that to the other superheroes are just like these weird pests that they're annoyed by and trying to shake off, and Rorschach is just like, I'm gonna murder you.
Yeah,
I'm gonna straight up murder you.
I'm gonna wreck you.
Which is sort of probably part of why the Keene Act needed
to actually become a thing.
You've got this guy in a costume just dropping people down.
I mean, they're vigilantes in like the truest sense. Like, when you think of we've referenced like Batman before, whatever else. Like Batman in general is like, he's like a vigilante, but he's generally, for like the most part, doing good things. Has a very strict moral code, right? The idea of Batman like not killing anybody, all these different things like that, whatever else. Not so much these are true vigilantes who are like, we're taking these situations into our own hands, and what happens, and especially with Rorschach, especially with him, for sure.
We see violence too. The original thing it says here, it's hooded justice. So the chapter 1 ends with this excerpt from Hollis Mason's autobiography, Under the Hood, which obviously he's published. He's revealing everything about being a masked vigilante or whatever. And he was inspired by the first one, which was called The Masked Justice, and originally just The Hooded Vigilante. And he, popped out on some people that were murdering people in an alleyway.
Right. He was the first guy who was like, you know what, I am taking this into my own hands. I'm going to change the world in a small way, at the very least in the beginning, through my own actions.
Another thing that's interesting here is that basically people started writing comics about superheroes based on this world that then sort of inspired all these other people to become superheroes. But it's based on these guys that started doing it.
Yep.
So it's like a world where, in a very meta way, there are superhero comics. Like there's comics and real people.
Right.
And the comics are about real people.
Right. This is very obviously, our biggest analogy probably to Watchmen, at least in that way nowadays, is what is that dang show? With the dude is a psychopath.
Which one? The Boys.
The Boys.
Yeah.
Right.
Also The Boys. Watchmen was sort of the first what if superheroes, but dark and edgy. Up until that point, I think there had been a few takes, but this was the one that really took off and was the first big. Oh, dark.
Yeah,
profound.
It's like the whole not just dark situations, but it's everything.
Right.
Like the world that they're dealing with is very, very dark all the time. They're at least so far that we've gotten into this, there is no day has been saved.
Right.
Yet.
And this is also a big, in a meta way, a big trend right now in our current media. Everything is dark. This actually relates to us just seeing Superman, which is one of the first examples of really positive, hopeful hero stuff. A lot of the superhero movies during our lifetime and shows right now. We've got The Boys. We have Invincible.
Right.
Another similar concept. We had Batman versus Superman, the Man of Steel, everything is dark. There's been a huge trend for that. And all of those things that are currently huge can trace some kind of lineage directly back to Watchmen.
Yep.
And a lot of it is, familiar, not because, Watchmen is like The Boys. It's because The Boys is Watchmen.
Yep, exactly. But yeah, we get this really kind of interesting glimpse into one of the actual heroes' heads with this excerpt from Hollis Mason. And then that kind of wraps up the end of the first chapter. And in the second chapter, we get basically the funeral of Edward Blake, of the comedian. And this chapter, I feel is used a lot to express everybody's different emotions about him. Because as we've learned, he was not... at the very least, not a great guy, and we'll learn a bit more about what that really means.
Yeah, so most of this chapter takes place at the comedian's funeral. Several of the cast of heroes show up, and each of them sort of gets these different flashbacks to different moments that they shared with the comedian. Some of them are really personal, some of them are really violent. None of them really make him look like a very good guy. Dr. Manhattan remembers how Blake joked about nuclear war. Lori thinks back to her mom's story about how Blake attacked her. Ozymandias, he recalls a heated conversation where, Blake mocked his big ideas about trying to help fix problems.
Right.
He's a super nihilistic guy. Dan remembers how they broke up a riot once. It's sort of when the Keene Act needed to happen, and they were all of a sudden patrolling streets with civilian. It was a very modern, police. He's clearly an analogy for state-sponsored police violence, except it's these state-sponsored superheroes. And he's sort of gleefully shooting smoke grenades.
Right, they're going around, and Dan, the Night Owl is being he's on the microphone. He's like, please, go home. We can't do whatever else. And the comedian, Edward Blake, is just let's get shit rocking. I'm about to bop all these people. Come watch me do this.
So we should flip through the pages and sort of revisit the chapter.
Yeah.
But also to I can just finish with the little mini summary here. So there's sort of the funeral taking place. Rorschach is not there. We sort of have a side arc with Rorschach, which is mostly him breaking into the home of an old villain named Moloch. And obviously he's super, Rorschach is like, oh, Moloch, you evil, whatever. But Moloch is kind of this like pathetic old guy. It seems like he has cancer or something. He's living by himself. Basically, the comedian had pulled up to Moloch's, drunk, paranoid, and went on some big rant about a secret island. It's sort of like a confusing little diatribe that this guy doesn't understand. But basically, Rorschach leaves that whole interaction convinced that this isn't just a random murder. He's absolutely right, and something's going on. There's a larger plot. The comedian had become aware of something and got killed.
Yep, exactly. And one of the things that we kind of get, I mean, the whole point, I think, of this chapter, right? Back to some of these flashbacks that we've kind of talked about so far. One of the first ones that we get is with Laurie and her mom, Sally Jupiter, the original Silk Spectre, obviously remembering the assault and how the original masked guy, Hooded Justice, comes in and whoops his ass and is like, get out of here, to Edward Blake, basically saying, get out of here. And then one of the other ones that we get, which I feel like is this really, one of the most intense, in addition to, I mean, this whole thing is like intense, just about how divisive this guy was. Dr. Manhattan has this memory while at the funeral of being with the comedian in Vietnam, right? And this is, again, really great for setting the stage of what it is that we're talking about here and the time that we're talking about here. But the intensity of the Vietnam War, and he's with the comedian. They're basically going to be, the war is just kind of, quote unquote, ended, and they're going to be leaving Vietnam. And this woman comes up to them who is like obviously pregnant, and it seems that she's Vietnamese, and she's basically saying, to the comedian, oh, this is your child. And the comedian's like basically just completely dismissing her, saying, I'm not like,
I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, I'm getting out of here. You're staying here. I'm leaving. Don't try and stop me, whatever else. And then she, rightfully so, gets upset, breaks this bottle and attacks him. And I mean, this is, again, one of the, like, another just intense scene with this guy. Basically, she attacks him. He freaks out and shoots her and kills her. So he basically kills this woman that is pregnant with his child right, I mean, just in cold blood. Again, that's just another thing about him.
Crazy.
But he kills him also right in front of Dr. Manhattan.
He literally says, what'd you do, you bitch? You hurt my face, you whore, you filthy, stinking, worthless. And Dr. Manhattan goes, Blake, don't do it. And, Dr. Manhattan is just sort of looking on in shock as he kills this person. And then Dr. Manhattan says, Blake, she was pregnant. You gunned her down. He says, yeah, that's right. Pregnant woman, gunned her down. Bang, bang. And you know what? You watched me. You could have changed the gun into steam, or the bullets into mercury, or the bottle into snowflakes. You could have teleported either of us to goddamn Australia, but you didn't lift a finger. You don't really give a damn about human beings. I've watched you. You never cared about whatever is her name, Janie Slater, even before you ditched her. Soon you won't be interested in Sally Jupiter's little gal either. You're drifting out of touch, Doc. You're turning into a flake. God help us all.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of crazy because it's another moment of the comedian being obviously crazy, but also like he is so pessimistic, but is like such a obvious reason for the world being as terrible as he sees it.
Right, like he's not just some cackling. Like he's the comedian. I guess that makes
like
us think of the Joker.
Joke. It's the cruel joke.
The world is the joke. Like
Yeah.
he's and this is sort of reminiscent of some. We've definitely been in conversations with. It's easy to feel that way now. You know what I mean? I think it's very, in our current 2025,
Right.
we sort of, a lot of things try to pull us towards a kind of nihilism of
Yep.
like, oh, everything's broken. The system's broken. Why should we even try to fix it? Why should, so it's sort of, this is obviously a different era and addressing different political things, but that's one of the examples I think of, and maybe Alan Moore, maybe we don't want to be the comedian,
Right.
maybe we
Yeah.
want to try to not just give in.
Not even maybe.
I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to get
comedian.
someone pregnant and then murder them. That's for sure.
Absolutely. No, he's crazy. I mean, and so this is like another one of these flashbacks. We also get this flashback from one of the heroes, Ozymandias, who is this guy. What is his name? Where is his name?
I can jump in at we see the you're talking about Ozymandias' flashback?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, his last name is Vate.
Oh,
Adrian
Veidt.
Adrian Veidt or Vet. Well, we can figure it. Doesn't matter. It's Ozymandias. Ozymandias' flashback, is to the second round of Minutemen. You sort of have one of the original guys, older generation, trying to whip everybody into, we need to do this stuff. And his little monologue is actually, not ideal. He's saying crime isn't standing still. New social evils emerge every day from promiscuity, drugs, campus subversion, you name it. By now, banding together as the Crime Busters, we could. So literally, we're seeing that the superhero team that originally was fighting crime or whatever is now slowly becoming, I don't think we want that, right? This whole Crime Buster thing going against promiscuity, drugs, and campus subversion, that's like now, they would be shutting down, Free Palestine protests or whatever, and these homosexual drag queens get them out of campuses and whatever. It's the same thing. It's like, oh, wait a second, the superhero team, the Avengers, are like right wing,
right?
And then it's the comedian who says bullshit, and this guy says what? He says, I call bullshit. This whole idea, Crime Busters, this stinks. You're getting old, and you want to go on playing cowboys and Indians, and he's like, oh, that's not true. And then Dan, Night Owl, says, listen, let's not throw away the idea right away. Me and Rorschach have been making headway in the gang problem by pooling our efforts. Rorschach says, obviously I agree, but a group this size seems more like a publicity exercise somehow. It's too big. It's too unwieldy. So you can already see that this is when the superheroes are sort of beginning to fracture, and the Avengers, as it were, is sort of falling apart. But it's all for different reasons. You can see one of them is like a right-wing fascism adjacent thing. Adrian Veidt is getting super rich, selling action figures of himself. Rorschach and Night Owl are truly, like, they're the ones in New York just trying to stop the gangs. The comedian is like taking government. He's got red, white, and blue spangled banner on his outfits now. He's just taking government contracts.
Yep.
And Dr. Manhattan, a literal,
the only real super
being, basically a nuclear, the stand-in for nuclear energy itself, is just standing there in the room in tights, just watching, not really saying anything.
With his girl at the time, actually, and we'll talk about.
He's always
more about
with
that.
a girl.
He's always with a girl. We'll talk more about that later on. But one of the other things that I can't even believe I forgot to mention is that Ozymandias, Adrian Veidt, also, when Rorschach comes and talks to him originally about the comedian, he's like, yeah, that dude was basically a Nazi.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and you're right. It's like, what this story, I feel like, starts off basically being like, what if the Avengers were like super right wing, like crazy people? Like what would be going on there? Yeah, no, straight up. You can just see how messy this is, and I think it's such a good example of what would this really look like. Like, this is such a what would superheroes be for real? Not like, oh, Tony Stark is in Iraq and then he becomes Iron Man and saves the day and learns like, what if they
the
were
right
just
answer.
as truly, deeply, genuinely flawed as real people? And
who would be, and guess what? It's like now, like, obviously we're living in an era where we've got freaking Luigi Mangione. Yep. We have people starting to take matters into their own hands and, kill CEOs, which is wild. There's also, back for January 6th, in their mind, there's like the Proud Boys and whatever. In the real world, the people that are going to be trying to take actions into their own hands and think of themselves as some kind of superhero, have this narrative that they're going to pull up and be the ones to make a difference with the weapons and whatever. They're kind of extremist ideologies, period. Even, it's basically showing, even mixed up in the well-meaning, whatever the intentions may be, the reality is a pretty fucked up scenario that it's pretty grim. Yeah. The whole thing is pretty grim.
It's pretty grim, and I feel like this is like a good kind of roundabout way to talking about that end of this chapter that you talked about, where we kind of get this breakdown of this story when Rorschach visits this old enemy of the comedian, and he basically talks about when the comedian kind of came to visit him. I think it was like a week before his death, right? Exactly. And even this, basically like psychopath is freaking out about the state of the world. I mean, I think what he's alluding to, right, is the dropping of the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? He's like, I feel like he's remembering this, or he's like remembering, like, at the very least, he's I think, alluding to this, because you remember about being in an airship, and basically the way that human beings can attack each other and destroy. I think one of the things he says here, on that island they got writers. Actually, so maybe this isn't necessarily Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but maybe this is realistically more about his Vietnam experience and whatever else too. But he's basically saying, on that island they got writers, scientists, and artists, and what they're doing.
Oh, I think you don't know what this is referring to yet.
Oh, maybe I don't.
So you don't know about this. So this is something that the comedian just has uncovered.
Oh. Yeah, no, I don't even know.
You don't know
this
yet.
hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. So this was something. So this island that the comedian uncovered. This is what Rorschach's trying to investigate.
Oh, right. So this is like so. Let's say it's
a
something
week before
terrible.
He got murdered.
He's trying to investigate this thing, but he's basically saying, I mean, this is what's crazy, right? And this is the thing that I'm thinking about, is that thing that he's talking about. He's basically like, I shot kids in Vietnam, but I'm not doing shit like what they're doing.
Right. Like whatever is about to unfold.
Right. Exactly. And so we got to learn that. So,
which is wild. The end of the chapter also mirrors the structure of the first one a little bit, because we get Rorschach walking by himself again. This time he's, instead of being in like this back alleyway, he's in like a Times Square type place. He said, he's on 42nd Street, literally. He says, we get his journal, Rorschach's journal, October 16th, 1985. 42nd Street, women's breasts draped across every billboard, every display, littering the sidewalk. Everything's offered Swedish love, French love, but not American love. American love, like Coke in green glass bottles, they don't make it anymore.
Yeah.
He's just such a edgelord, dude. It's crazy.
He's an edgelord sad boy for sure.
He breaks into this thing and he says,
he breaks into the cemetery to kind of pay his respects, or his I don't even know if they're respects, to pay something to the comedian, because he didn't show up for the funeral.
Yeah, okay, so here he goes. He says, Edward Morgan Blake, born 1924, 45-year-old, a comedian, died in 1985, buried in the rain. Is that what happens to us? A life of conflict with no time for friends, so that when it's done, only our enemies leave roses? Violent lives ending violently. Dollar Bill, the silhouette, Captain Metropolis. We never die in bed. Not allowed. Something in our personalities, perhaps. Some animal urge to fight and struggle, making us who we are. Yeah, it's unimportant. We do what we have to do. Others bury their heads between the swollen teat of indulgence and gratification, piglets squirming beneath a sow for shelter. But there is no shelter. And the future, it bears down on us like an express train. Blake understood. Treated it like a joke, but he understood. He saw the cracks in society, saw the little men in masks trying to hold it together. He saw the true face of the 20th century and chose to become a reflection of it, a parody of it. No one else saw the joke. That's why he was lonely. So Rorschach is kind of getting to, that's what we're seeing. All these other people are, like, we can see that the comedian, in his own way, was kind of tuned in. Like he kind of saw the bigger picture.
He became a reflection of the world that he, as far as we know, like, hated, which is obviously not the right way to go about it in a real sense, but in a like narrative sense, like, where I feel like he's supposed to kind of paint the picture of like what the world is like for them. Right,
for
then.
sure.
Like, when you see it through, that's the crazy thing about like the riots that we see them breaking, whatever. These are not like small things that they're breaking. Like, there's like hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands of people that they're wading through to stop the descent of what's going on, and everything's just falling apart.
For sure.
Same with this guy.
The other thing, in a meta sense, is Alan Moore is saying the comedian, like, we see a lot of the other superheroes don't really get it. They're running around because they want to punch people, or they have their own little vendetta, or it kind of implies that some of them just love the excitement of, it's like of adventure. Exactly. Like this, it's a thrill for them to put on the costume and go do whatever. But the comedian, he sort of sees the bigger picture, and it's sort of in a similar way. I feel like now, or not now, across all time and political happenings. Mm-hmm. But there's those of us who are sort of trying to be somewhat tuned into it, and other people who are, as Rorschach says, like, bury their heads in the sand or just distracted at the teat of indulgence
Right,
or whatever.
right.
But it's true. It's like a lot of people are just kind of oblivious. A lot of people, it's much more comfortable to not see it because the reality is often terrible. The comedian, is one of the people that sees it, realizes how messed up things are, but takes the exact wrong message from it, and like he thinks it's all a joke, and we should just give in and be as terrible as the world around us.
Right, that's the only way to survive it for him, is to be just as terrible as the world around him.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, this chapter ends with another excerpt from Under the Hood by Hollis Mason, and we get more and more background on all the different kind of original group of heroes. They talk about, obviously, Silk Spectre. They talk about Captain Metropolis, who was this guy that brought a bunch of knowledge of military techniques. Silk Spectre, who's the one who has the daughter, who eventually becomes the one with Dr. Manhattan, and then the second Silk Spectre. We have Dollar Bill, which is actually, they kind of tell this interesting story about him. Like, he was supposed to, I guess, it's kind of the thing of like saying he was like the best of us. Like, he was like a nice guy.
Good guy.
He was a good kid.
And they gave him a cape.
And
This is the original joke from The Incredibles, dude.
Right.
The no capes thing.
Right, no capes. I know, that's exactly what it made me think of. But it's like
he died. So he was a superhero sponsored by a bank,
right,
which you can also see it's like a branded whatever dollar bill. He guards the banks,
right, and that's where his cape came from. Is they were like, it's got to look good for like the branding for this bank. And so one time when he's defending the bank against robbers or whatever else, his cape gets caught in like the revolving door at the front of the bank, and he just gets shot point blank and killed, and like that's it.
Wow.
Yeah. And again, these are not superheroes. These are just masked vigilantes, well, except for Dr. Manhattan. But
right.
But so we get kind of all this background on a couple of them, and the other thing that I think is really expressed in this too is just the realness of them. Like, he's like, they called us fascists, they called us perverts, and while there's an element of truth to both of those accusations, neither of them are big enough to take in the whole picture. Saying some of us were politically extreme. Before Pearl Harbor, I heard Hooded Justice openly expressing approval for the activities of Hitler's Third Reich. Like, these, again, what if the Avengers were, far right wing or whatever else? And then talking about like sexual hangups and things like that. Like, the whole point, I feel like, of what they're getting at.
I mean, they've already told the story of the villain who just wanted them to beat him up for
right,
gratification that Rorschach murdered.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these people are people, and I think what's interesting is it's like from like a psychological perspective, like, people that are willing to be these vigilantes or whatever else, like in real life, there's a lot of intense, this is a simplistic way to say it, but there's a lot of intense baggage that comes with that, for sure.
Totally. One of the things we're really getting a picture of, and I mean, this one's called Absent Friends, right? Chapter 2 is called Absent Friends. Rorschach is reminiscing on, or writing in his journal about, are they all doomed to die alone violently? It's really highlighting how lonely and alienated all of these characters are. Lori and Dan are sort of the only two that are reconnecting or socializing in some kind of a positive way.
Right.
All the rest of them, even when they're at this funeral, even like, they are all unhappy, isolated,
they're not talking to each other.
People. Yeah.
And actually, one thing about the funeral that I think is like such an interesting and great juxtaposition is that you have like the priest or whoever else like reading, I don't know if they're like the last rites or whatever it is, but of the comedian, all of these flashbacks of him just like being a terrible person, or all these are juxtaposed with this priest being like, deliver us from evil and may we ascend to heaven and whatever else. And they're like, this dude is going straight down, brother.
Yeah.
He's going down.
Yeah.
But
it's a tough one.
Yeah, and this chapter ends with, I think, talking about exactly that, where even Hollis is basically saying, the worst of these was the comedian. He assaulted Sally Jupiter. He left the group and joined up with the government and whatever else. But he was just a bad guy. He ended up he went on to make a name for himself as a war hero in the Pacific. But all I can think of. This guy says, but all I can think of are the bruises along Sally Jupiter's ribcage, and hope to God that America can find itself a better class of hero than that. And this is all about the comedian. So anyway, that's where we end chapter 2. On to chapter 3, the judge of all the earth.
Yeah, this is where things sort of start to escalate. Dr. Manhattan goes on live TV for an interview, but it just turns into a disaster. Basically, the host brings up a whole list of people who have gotten cancer after spending time around him. Dr. Manhattan freaks out, gets overwhelmed.
Yeah, he's like, what are you saying? Because what's so funny to me is like the fact that like that never occurred to him.
Right.
Like nothing like that. Him being like, what are you trying to say? It's like, bro, look at yourself, bro. Look at the things you can do. You're like the most radioactive thing. I'm surprised I didn't put a Geiger counter like right next to you, bro.
Well, this is all stuff. Yeah, man. I mean, this is all stuff where, we got to see how it plays out.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically he gets overwhelmed. He disappears. And then he freaking teleports himself to Mars.
And before that, he freaks out. And he's like, get out of here. They're in the TV studio. He's like, get out of here to all the people. And he teleports all of them home or like outside the studio, I think it is.
Right, yeah, to the parking lot.
And then he teleports to Mars.
It's crazy. The dude is insane. So basically, immediately after Dr. Manhattan goes to Mars, the Soviets invade Afghanistan.
Yeah, and that's like the background thing of all this. Obviously, this is all like Cold War. And one of the things that before he goes into this TV interview, you can see like the government officials are like around him,
don't talk about
Afghanistan, whatever else. And you kind of learn that like one of the reasons that the Russians are not invading Afghanistan is because the U.S. has Dr. Manhattan.
Dr. Manhattan is nuclear deterrence in one guy, because we see images of him in Vietnam at certain points in the comic. I think in this chapter somewhere.
He can just evaporate tanks.
He can just evaporate tanks. And also you see him, he's like 100 feet tall.
Yeah.
Like he can just change his state.
Yeah.
Anything
you can imagine like this guy can do is kind of like the idea.
Right. And it also just, it's like the 1-to-1 is what, if all of America's nukes were gone in an instant and that got broadcasted on live television to the rest of the world, and then what could go sideways right away. So yeah, basically, without Dr. Manhattan around, the balance of power in the DCU is shifted, whatever the Rock said.
Yeah.
Anyways, old reference. But basically, we also then see Lori sort of leaving Dr. Manhattan. Apparently, they had they basically, we can get deeper into it when we go through the chapter, but basically, she realizes that while they're having sex, first of all, he splits himself into multiple people to try to have sex with multiple people of himself. And then she isn't even as freaked out.
She's like, whoa.
She's like, whoa, dude. He's like, I thought you'd like this.
I just don't even know what you like anymore or whatever else.
But she's clearly not as phased. Like, I mean, that's weird, but she's not as thrown off by it as she goes out, like she like leaves the bedroom and realizes that there's other copies of him just like doing other.
He's like in the bathroom. I feel like that's the thing is like, I think it's like the real version of the quote unquote real or maybe like original version of him is like doing science experiments in the bathroom. Like this dude's not even involved.
He's not even tuned in. Yeah. So she's just like, basically understandably freaks out.
And is upset and then leaves and goes to Dan, the night owl.
Yep, exactly. The two of them basically, they have a big catch up, talk about their lives, talk about how they, when they quit being superheroes. We'll dig into that. And then also we get the introduction of this sort of weird little side story, which is a newsstand guy on the corner, and a young kid reading comics out of his newsstand. This is sort of a funny little mini plot. Is at this point superheroes have fallen out of fashion in storytelling because it's all messed up and political and whatever, and they're real. So instead, it's pirates. Pirates are the hotness. Like Marvel would be Pirates of the Caribbean in this timeline,
right?
And so that's what comic books are, is pirate stories. And so now we get glimpses of this like really grim, messed up pirate. Like this guy is sort of like marooned on an island and the whole crew is dead and he needs to drag all the dead bodies into a pile.
It's like, this dude is just really dealing with like hell. I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like great quotes, and it's a really interesting juxtaposition because it's like throughout this like whole, I feel like through a lot of this chapter, you're kind of getting this, back and forth between like when this kid is kind of talking with this this newsstand guy who's basically the newsstand guy. Like his whole thing is like, I'm a newsstand guy. I know what's going on in the world. I know what to expect.
Everyone's got to look out for themselves. It's every man for himself in this world. And then at the very end, when he gets the paper announcement that Russia has invaded Afghanistan, he immediately completely flips and he's like, "Oh, we all got to take care of each other."
Hey kid, he's like yelling at the kid over. He's like, you gonna buy that, whatever else. And then he sees the paper and he's like, hey kid, have that thing. Also, here's my hat, like whatever else, like don't, get rained on, whatever else. And then he runs off. I
think among other things that could be a little bit of a commentary on America, like, or just, we tend, when we're in a time of prosperity and we feel powerful or whatever, we're all boastful and blustering. And, but then as soon as it gets scary,
change your tune.
That sort of changes things. And the whole vibe with the pirate comic, everything is like, this whole chapter also is just building suspense. Like it feels like all these different storylines are all just sort of like running in parallel with each other towards like bad stuff.
We also get this kind of like quote unquote character, but like side character that we haven't actually mentioned, who shows up actually, I think outside the funeral, and he shows up in the beginning of chapter 1. He shows up at the funeral and he shows up here again. But there's this guy walking around with a sign that says the end is nigh.
Yeah. What do you think about this guy?
I think that this guy, I mean, I don't know who he is. Maybe he's like a bigger thing to the story. Obviously he's shown up a couple of times, but like the kind of like interesting thing in this story, right, is that, or at least in this chapter, is that we kind of get to the end and like, he's like the end is not, he's like, the paper guy asks him like, when is the end coming? And he's like, it's going to be today or whatever else.
Yeah.
But can you hold my paper for tomorrow? And he's like, yeah, toss me a coin. I'll hold the paper for tomorrow or whatever else, right? And I think that's just such an interesting, like...
This is a great clock, Antonio. I don't want to... so this is like this is a plot relevant guy.
Gotcha.
So good job noticing him.
He's showing up.
But so I won't get into, that guy's deal because we're going to discover it together. But we do see him multiple times. He's outside the apartment with his sign.
Right, he's like walking past the blood.
Yeah, he's walking past the comedian's body. Where else do we see him? I think he's walking outside the funeral. Yeah. So you're exactly right. There's this sort of like homeless guy with a sign saying the end is nigh.
Yeah.
Who keeps popping up. It's wild.
He's all over the place. But we really get like the interesting thing with this, to kind of jump back to this story that this kid is reading, this pirate story. I mean, it's really just like. I mean, it's just like hellish. Like that's like the whole idea is that like, I think it's another maybe metaphor for like, to a certain extent, like what the world is being like and whatever else right now. But basically saying, it's like things like, reader, take comfort from this. In hell, at least the ghouls are contented, right? Because they're like feasting on the bodies of like his dead crew members and whatever else. Yeah. Bosun Ridley lay nearby. Birds were eating his thoughts and memories. And, all this, I mean, it's really, I think, such an analogy for kind of this idea of what obviously this guy's walking around with the sign saying the end is nigh, but like the world is like in a very terrible state.
Right. Again, like you were saying, today, a lot of us feel there's endless things in 2025 to feel like the world is going to end.
Right.
We've got climate change. We've got the current American presidency. We've got China. We've got Russia, Ukraine. We've got Israel, Palestine. We've got AI around the corner. Did I mention climate change? We've got in LA. We're in LA recording this. We've got regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum, the reality is we have masked people jumping out of unmarked vehicles, kidnapping people out of their communities.
Right.
However you feel about that may vary, but I don't feel great about that.
No, I mean it's a scary time that nobody's like this reminds me of a really good time in history.
Yeah, we're exactly. Yeah, it feels like scary times. So relevant time for us to be reading Watchmen. And
I think so.
So to the next section, right? We after this sort of first newsstand interaction, jumping into the Dr. Manhattan Laurie interactions. A lot of this is kind of funny and played for laughs because he's, she's like, "Oh, Laurie, don't be." So to be clear, there are multiple Dr. Manhattans in bed with her. She first is into it, realizes there's too many hands. She's like, oh, stop it. Just John, just be one person again. He's like, Lori, don't be upset. I thought you'd enjoy this. I do try to please you. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. I know I overreacted. And he's like, oh yeah, I just don't know what stimulates you anymore. You can see he's just confused. And then she realizes that he's doing signs in the bathroom. She says, John, how the hell long have you been working out here? He says, Lori, try to understand. My work's at a very important stage. It seemed unnecessary to. She freaks out.
Right, she leaves.
Right, and he says, Lori, wait, can't we talk? If there's a problem with my attitude, I'm prepared to discuss it. Lori, so he's just fully at a loss. Like he's not being like that's what's so interesting about it.
He's the only one who's like not a human. Who's like
he's not a human.
And what's interesting about this too is that we start at the same time that she's like walking out, we start getting this insight into the woman that he was with before her. Who's kind of she's starting to give this kind of like expose to the paper at the same time that they eventually end up setting. I think it's like this paper is waiting for the interview that's about to happen with Dr. Manhattan to happen before they actually release this paper. And so she's basically giving all the dirt on this guy, and she's like coughing, she's sick, whatever else, but basically just saying like, he was like with me, whatever else. And then it basically came to a point where after all the times that he said that he loved me, he still did this like terrible thing, and you're kind of like wondering like what the hell is going on? Like, what did this guy do? Who even is this? I mean, who really even is this lady? And through the interactions that Lori has with Dan, you start learning more and more about how just like his name is John, right? Dr. Manhattan. He's obviously we've seen so far, but like. It just shows more and more how detached he is, how removed he is emotionally from everything that's going on. He can do anything. And Lori's even like, I know what he's doing right now that I left. He's probably just like sitting there staring at stuff. And she's like, he stares at things like he's literally, like he stares at like everything, like he's never seen it before.
Right. The way he looks at things, like he can't remember what they are and doesn't particularly care. This world, the real world, to him, it's like walking through mist and all the people are like shadows in the fog. It's really sort of existential and crazy. And she obviously cares about him as she's trying to explain it. We also saw earlier, basically, their relationship as it exists now is the government. Well, Dr. Manhattan is a government asset. He's just in these crazy labs doing crazy science. That's all he's really thinking about.
Right.
She just hangs out with him. And there was some side comment somebody made in one of the previous chapters saying, oh, well, he's like a nuclear asset that still needs to get laid or whatever. So the government, it's like the government kind of just pays for
her to keep just, them together.
Right. Basically keep him calm, like keep him whatever. So her whole job is to kind of babysit Dr. Manhattan as he goes about his government shenanigans.
Right. Exactly. Which is probably
and she's sort of venting
exhausting prospect.
Right. Yeah. And she's venting about all of this to Dan. Obviously, they at some point were in love, or maybe they still are, or whatever. But it's pretty clear that
she's running to him for like a reason. Obviously, there's some kind of like emotional.
Oh, I meant Dan. I meant Dr.
John?
Manhattan, but obviously, yeah. She and Dan are like they're friends. Clearly, they have a whole history. They're similar age. Dan isn't a blue god.
Right, exactly. And kind of like one of the things stepping forward with this. What's interesting during that. This is, I think, one of these really great moments of just like how kind of beautifully laid out this comic is. You have these moments where when Dr. Manhattan is doing this interview, where he eventually, freaks out and teleports people away and teleports to Mars and whatever else, you get this juxtaposition between him doing that and Lori and Dan kind of like walking through his like, I can't remember if it's like his or hers, but basically this crappy neighborhood. And the dialogue that's happening in each of the scenes is kind of like jumping back and forth and like referencing what's happening in the other. And so, for example, you'll get this moment where one of the guys at the TV station is basically being like, oh, can you change your color or whatever else? And then Dr. Manhattan changes what he looks like. He's like, oh, is this dark enough? And he's like, my God, that's great. That's perfect. And then you get this like jump to the next scene where you see that Lori and Dan are like walking to this alley, and you see basically these seedy characters are looking like they're about to mug them. And then the dialogue that is coming from the other scene is used on this frame and basically says, that's certainly dark enough for my purposes, right? And alluding to this dark situation that they're about to be in.
Right. So timeline wise, narratively, we've got the as the interview is escalating, there's also Laurie and Dan getting mugged. And another thing that to jump onto our, Scott McCloud 5 concepts here that we want to try to keep referencing. We'll, in our end wrap up, we'll run through some of those just briefly. But look, all of the panels, while things are calm and normal, basically this whole story mostly stays on a very clear 3x3, 9 panels per page grid. And yet it works so well. Like a lot of the other comics we read so far in this, Kickback Comics journey, they experiment a lot more with the different size panels. They do more with them. Maybe this is a bit more old fashioned and traditional. But then look, as it gets crazy and heats up and becomes more hectic, the gutters and panels become more hectic, and are all these different crazy sizes. Yeah, we get all the consistency colors changes. The colors get more vivid, more reds, more intense hues.
Yeah, shout out to our boy John Higgins, going crazy in this, by the way.
We'll talk about the art in our sort of wrap up and general thoughts, but yeah, it's just really good storytelling. It's these two different narratives are occurring simultaneously, both heating up at the same time. Yeah, so we see Dr. Manhattan basically getting confronted and mobbed. Everyone starts freaking out, thinking he's giving everyone around him cancer. They start asking about Afghanistan. This government agent that's watching over him is sort of trying to get people away from him. And then we see Dan and Laurie have a whole fight scene where these muggers think they're just some unassuming couple, but little do they know they used to throw down.
Right, and they beat the hell out of them.
They do. Side by side, they beat the hell out of all these people. And then they are kind of like...
You get this interesting moment afterwards where like the first thing that I thought of was like almost like an after sex situation where
totally
they and this is like obviously like something that they connect on as well, right? But they beat these guys up and then they're like breathing super hard.
Literally, they're leaning against each other, panting. Their panting is in separate word bubbles. Then there's a panel where they're leaning in, looking into each other's faces, and their panting joins.
Yeah, the bubbles joins together, and then I think
they look away, kind of embarrassed. Like Dan is running his hands through her hair. She immediately lights a cigarette.
Yeah, so there you go, lighting a cigarette, right? Very classic, especially I feel like of the time.
Post-sex moment.
Yep, exactly. It's like they're almost like embarrassed of that like connection moment.
What do you mean old fashioned, bro? You don't freaking light up
a cigarette.
Light up a cigarette.
That's true. Maybe it's not even old fashioned. People still be doing that. They still do that nowadays. Or maybe light up a joint.
They also used to start a lot of fires. Like house fires were like mostly from cigarettes turning mattresses on fire, bro. That's why all our mattresses are like fireproof and whatever.
That's so funny.
People smoke in bed.
That's so wild.
It's wild. What an era.
Yeah, what a time. But so we kind of come back to this situation afterwards where they split. Dr. Manhattan, everybody kind of now is seeing this TV interview that's gone, completely awry.
He teleports home. I forgot about this. He teleports home, and there's already a government agent before the interview has just wrapped.
Government agency,
right? Or I mean, him in Lowry's apartment, wherever that is.
I think that's it's like in the government facility.
Okay, that makes sense. But regardless, the government guy has putting danger quarantine zone on the apartment. And Dr. Manhattan is speaking to him, and the guy, he's like, it seems he says, safety regulations I see, it seems I'm incapable of cohabitating safely, either emotionally or physically. Perhaps you'd best just tell Lowry and your superiors that I'm leaving. The guard says, leaving? He says, yes, for Arizona first, I think, and then Mars. And the guy thinks he's joking. He's like, you had me going. You're a regular kind of guy. And then, of course, Dr. Manhattan disappears. His suit that he's wearing for the interview just like falls to the floor empty, and he's gone. And then we have these beautiful silent panels. We see him in Arizona clearly
picking up a photo, right? Which we'll learn a lot more about. But he picks up this photo that has this man and woman in it, and he's just looking at it kind of pensively. And then he walks off, looks up into the stars. And again, these beautiful silent panels, looks up in the stars. He's all blue. He's all naked. And then you get this big like burst of light. And then boom, he's gone.
These are iconic panels too. Like a lot of people get this one tatted, like these ones of him looking off into
I
space.
think I've probably even seen that.
These are big. Yeah, these are like on T-shirts, on Pinterest board. Like you'll just see this all the time, and you don't realize that it's from Watchmen. And this is.
And this is another interesting thing because you get this throwback to the story that this kid is reading at the end of this, where you get this excerpt that says, that night I slept badly beneath cold, distant stars, pondering upon the cold, distant God in whose hands the fate of David's town rested. Was he really there? Had he been there once, but now departed? And now this is who we're talking about. Dr. Manhattan, at least in the reference here, is the God. I mean, and for all intents and purposes in that world, he was God.
He's both. That's what's actually so cool, I think, is Dr. Manhattan is both the God that has departed, and he's also the one that's sleeping badly under the stars. Like, that's part of what's crazy here is he... we don't know, and maybe he doesn't know. Like, is he a god? What is he? Like, what is a superhuman? Like an actual metahuman? What's that experience like?
Right.
This dude is. This is what's crazy too. Is we see him earlier, split into 5 different versions of himself, having sex with his girlfriend, doing science in the bathroom, preparing for the interview in the other room, whatever.
Right.
And totally detached, completely unable to understand why this is even freaking her out. He literally just said, it seems I'm unable of safely cohabitating here physically or mentally. I should probably just leave. But he's upset. He went and found this old photo in this desert in Arizona. I'm sure we'll find out more about that upcoming.
I'm sure.
Found a heirloom. He went to Arizona to get
this thing before
this
literally.
Photo.
He's like, the last thing I'm grabbing before I leave Earth.
Right.
Is this photo.
He's butt naked. He's looking down at this photo. Like, you can see he's sad in his face. He's really, it's not like we don't, obviously he's struggling to connect with other people emotionally or understand what's going on, but he also at the same time, there's some kind of humanity or something going on because he's struggling, he's going through it himself. He's also visibly upset by the idea that he's giving cancer to everybody too. Clearly.
Right. Yeah.
Like it totally freaks him out.
Without knowing it. Like that's, What's so interesting, and we'll talk about this more on. It's like it's interesting that he doesn't know that.
That is interesting,
right? That seems like something that he should have figured out. But so we start approaching kind of the end of this chapter, and what we end up seeing is that Laurie finally comes back around after again these kind of great panels with this comic the comic that the kid is reading and the newspaper guy. But Laurie comes back around to their apartment in this government facility, and is like, gone, like where is he gone, whatever else, and all the government guys are like in their hazmat suits cleaning up everything, whatever else, and the one government agent kind of like handler person that she's with is like, did you like happen to stress him out in any way last night or whatever else? And she's like, you're blaming me, like you guys are gonna get in big trouble, this whole thing. And he's like, the government guy's like, listen bro, like this is like our only deterrence for like the Russians, for whatever else. Like you're saying
nuclear Armageddon.
I'm in big trouble, bro. We are in big trouble. Everybody's in big trouble. Yeah.
Dr. Manhattan, only thing holding back the nuclear apocalypse. Because in this world, right, we also see in the background, interestingly, Nixon, Watergate never happened.
Right.
The U.S. government is not the same timeline that we're on.
Yep.
Nixon is the president. We literally see him. And then we cut between these different panels of Dr. Manhattan up on Mars, exploring around in these beautiful, like, bright pink panels with these amazing, like, starry background. He's blue. It stands out in crazy contrast. It's just so cool. It's visually so cool. And then everybody else is in the situation room or whatever, looking at this huge map, basically using some
like, what if the nukes fall? How bad is it going to be?
And they're saying their conservative estimates is we lose all of the East Coast, and then they're talking about wind. We're going to lose the whole East Coast. I don't know. It's coming up now with anticipated wind patterns. It looks like Mexico would catch the worst of it, but we could probably salvage a lot of the farm belt. Dr. Manhattan has been gone for hours, and the U.S. government is already preparing to lose
nuclear war. This is not like one nuke gets dropped. This is like we got like 10 things sitting on here, whatever else. Everything's about to go. About to go. And so we start reaching the end of this chapter again with another great excerpt from Under the Hood by Hollis Mason. And actually, one thing I'll actually bring up before that is that we get is this a Bible verse? at the
Bible
end of
verse.
this?
Yeah. The final things of this conversation is, it's Nixon, I think. I'd always kind of hoped that the big decision would rest with somebody else. This is going to take some thinking about. It's like naval battles of old. So much depends on a quirk of the wind. The wind's a force of nature. It's totally impartial. Then we cut to Dr. Manhattan on Mars. Totally indifferent. I think we'll give it a week, gentlemen, before bringing out our big guns. After that, humanity is in the hands of a higher authority than mine. Let's just hope he's on our side. And then we see Dr. Manhattan staring out into space, sitting by himself on Mars. And we see, shall
Genesis.
not the judge of all earth do right? Question mark. Genesis chapter 18, verse 25.
Shall he? I don't know. I guess we're gonna find out, right?
Crazy. It's getting heavy.
Yeah, and so then we get to our kind of this last bit of under the hood, where we get kind of the I think the true end of the Minutemen as they were originally, where we kind of see where everybody's ending up. Sally Jupiter, original Silk Spectre, gets married to the publicist for the group, and they go off and have a kid, and so she's not part of this stuff anymore. Everybody kind of either dies or goes about their own way. And the interesting thing is that Hooded Justice, right, who's one of the original guys, I mean, as far as we know, they basically think that he's like dead. He disappears around the same time.
He doesn't give in to the Keene Act.
No, he
just
doesn't.
dips.
Yeah.
The government basically, Hollis, some people are like, okay, I'm going to retire. I'll say my real identity. I'll retire. The comedian and the second night owl Dan obviously work with the government for some amount of time.
Right.
The comedian continues to for a longer period of time.
Rorschach, right, also says, which is so interesting too. Now that I think about it, the way that he says that he's not going to retire in comparison to his feelings about the comedian, right? Because he seems like he has these really intense personal principles, but there's this moral ambiguity where like the comedian is basically a rapist, and he
war criminal,
et cetera,
everything.
Right? But the way that Rorschach says that he's not giving in and not turning himself into the police is that he drops I don't know if the guy's dead. I think he is, or something like that. Or he's like at least beat up or whatever else enough for them to take him to jail. But a rapist on the police front steps that basically says, I'm not giving up. I'm not done.
Right. Yeah. Rorschach sees things in just stark black and white. He has his whole own code, which we can talk a little bit more about in a second. So, I mean, that's actually seen. Why don't we take a little mini break here, and then this can sort of conclude our, unless you have any other closing thoughts, our discussion of these first 3 chapters. Then we'll take a little break. We'll come back and just have like a little mini wrap up, talk about any overarching thoughts, or try to revisit some stuff maybe we missed, and just hit some general talking points, and wrap up this first episode of Watchmen.
Watchmen, hell yeah. We're back.
We're
from
back.
a break.
Yep. So first thing we should sort of get out of the way, because we want this to try to be sort of fluid, is let's take a second and touch back in with our 5 concepts that we got from Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics.
Yes.
Those were level of abstraction, panels and gutters, use of color, line work, and word image relationship. Did anything stand out to you? Like any thoughts on that general front for this first
generally pretty literal. I feel like when it comes to like level of abstraction, I think that everything is like pretty like realistic. I think that
it looks old timey.
Yeah,
like I don't know how to really say
it's
that.
It's very much comic of the time. I think that's exactly what it is.
But it's also
in the best
it's
possible way. Like, and I mean that truly as like a compliment. Like, it is a comic of the time in the most like fun. I mean, we talked about this even earlier with like the Superman stuff, but it's like this colorful idea of like older stuff. Obviously we talked about when we talked about Superman, we talked about it in like this kind of optimistic sense, but there's this colorful aspect, really bright, bold colors that come from this older comic.
I think that's one of the most important things with this comic. That's crazy. It's like a lot of what it's depicting, especially in these first few chapters, are pretty mundane settings. It's like a city, an interior of a lab, a building. It's all pretty drab stuff, and they totally could color that in
Just like
just normally.
that's what it looks like.
But it's exactly what you're saying. It's super saturated, super bold. The blacks are totally black. The whites are popping. Like it looks. It's like a, even though the content of the images are maybe a little bit more mundane than what we're used to, it's almost psychedelic in how bold the colors are.
That's a great point. Yeah,
and it makes it like what might be less, like panels that might not be quite as artistically fulfilled. I mean, that sounds super high mind or something. Like, how do I say it? Like, not as satisfying. It's like they use the color to make it beautiful to look at.
Yeah, it is super beautiful to look at. I mean, that was like, I feel like, level of abstraction is definitely very little, but when we get into color, I mean, it's like, well, I'm going to even talk more about that, but let's talk about panels.
I don't think we need, I don't think, we don't need to run through each of these one by one. I think we should, Antonio, meta-analysis here to whatever listeners we have.
Yeah.
The whole time we're doing this, we're new to this whole project, and we're also trying to streamline how we present this, make it as easy to follow as possible, make it not boring.
For you guys.
Also for us.
Yes.
Also for us.
Also for us. And you.
But yeah, so I mean, we want to touch base on, like, we want to have this be a thing that we check in with throughout all the different stories, but I don't think we should try to structure it such that we have to talk through every single one. We should just talk about what we find exciting and what pops out to us.
Here's one that pumps out to me that's in here, whatever else. Talking about panels and gutters. Obviously, we talked a little bit before about how there's like a lot of this, like there's not a lot of, at least so far, like, different panels overlapping into each other or whatever else, right? But we've talked about the dialogue before, right? Which is super interesting when it's like, I love that this is also a fun one for like stylized, slightly stylized dialogue bubbles where it's like, for example, if somebody's like talking, and then this is kind of, I feel like just comic stuff in general, but like when somebody's talking, right, we get these actual like speech bubbles. When it's Rorschach's diary, everything's like within a square or whatever else,
and ripped out pages.
Right, ripped out pages. And then when we get like the pirate story with this kid that we were just talking about, those are like ripped out pages, but it's like stylized in like a piratey way, so like when everything's coming from it. So it's like even though there aren't like overlapping panels or whatever else, I guess I would say, like the panels interact with each other and the dialogue interacts with the different panels in such an interesting way.
Absolutely.
That is just like super fun to me. And I was going to say the other thing that I think I thought of automatically when we got like all these flashbacks in the second chapter here was time and the way that they jump around with this stuff. And, right. We got even like images of clocks and whatever else.
At the beginning of each chapter,
midnight,
we see a clock moving. And then each
10 p.m.
Each chapter, that clock has more blood dripping down from the top of the page. Yep. And as we see the clock move closer to midnight.
Right, exactly. But the thing that I really thought about was like, kind of one of the, I don't know if it's like a criticism, but acknowledgement that I had when we read Spider-Man before, like how it kind of jumped around. It's like 2 months ago, this, whatever else, right? They don't have any of those like, hey, this is when this was, whatever else, right? It's like when they have those flashbacks, they're just like, yeah, back when shit was going on, man.
You literally see their face, like you just, like we cut from Dan looking down, pondering. We see them framed, like this layout in this page. This is page 58. Is absolutely, it's just so cool, and it's so readable. Everything is presented to us in a way that is so easy to follow. Like very rarely do I find myself going, wait, hold on, what's going on? What's in the page? Like the larger story is complex, but panel to panel, you kind of see, what's going on.
You know what's going on, and this is like some of the thing that going back to Scott McCloud, like this idea of like your brain, like the relationship that comics have with the person reading them, right, is that your ability to fill in the moments that are happening in between. And I feel like exactly what you were saying, it's so seamless in like so many ways. Where again, you can go from these guys looking pensively at the funeral, whatever else, to jumping to a flashback in literally the next panel, and it doesn't feel jarring. It doesn't feel like what the hell is going on or whatever else. You're like, oh, we're in a flashback. It's like,
it's just so well done.
I don't know enough to say like how similar or dissimilar this is to like storyboarding like TV shows and movies and whatever else, but I feel like there's a lot of things, probably why there is like a movie and TV shows and a bunch of different things of this, right? Because you're like, man, I can look at this and like this is like, it feels like a storyboard type of thing. And maybe that's, I mean, I don't know what the relationships between comics and storyboards are, but
yeah, I mean, similar, right? Like
it all falls
movies,
together.
what are movies, but each frame is like just taking place over milliseconds, right?
Right.
Well, okay, great. So I think that's good enough for those concepts. Let's jump into some just, wrap up thoughts, maybe stuff we didn't hit. One of the things I just want to read.
Give us some Rorschach.
Yeah, exactly. I want to read Rorschach is he's sort of the main character. I think when people think Watchmen, he's sort of what most people picture.
He's the face.
Yeah, he's
kind of funny enough.
Yeah, he's faceless.
All right, one thing before you get into that, one thing I just wanted to mention that I forgot about before is I would also love to like see if they're pulling these ink blots from something, but like Rorschach's face, like the pattern, like you don't think about it automatically, but like the pattern on his mask is changing constantly. Constantly throughout this whole thing, which I think is so cool, and I think is such a testament to how intentional and thoughtful the artistry is that comes with this, right? It's like maybe there's something later in the story that I don't know that's going to be like, oh, this is why it does it in this, and you get to go back and be like, wow, he was doing that in chapter 1, that meant that he was feeling like this, right? Maybe, but it shows that like you could make it look the same all the time and still maybe get the same kind of effect, but this is like you're getting, Spider-Man, his eyes like squint and whatever else, and you can tell that he's like upset, right, or whatever else versus thing. You get the same kind of thing with Rorschach.
It's also just very Rorschach. It's all good,
Rorschach.
bro. It's
God have mercy.
Nah, bro, you'll get it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter. Call him whatever.
Yeah.
But it's also just he's unsettling. He's an unsettling guy.
Unsettling guy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Night Owl's like the only relatively settling guy. I feel like that's
also, I mean, a lot of their costumes, especially the original generation of Minutemen, they're pretty intentionally goofy looking.
Yeah,
they kind of look like guys in spandex. And then as it gets further on, like the comedian originally has this big like yellow jumpsuit, and then eventually sort of has like a Captain America armor type thing he ends up wearing. But
give us some diary.
Yeah,
entries,
I mean, so this is just the opening of the book, right? Rorschach's journal entry, October 12th, 1985. Dog carcasses in an alley this morning. Tire tread on a burst stomach. This city is afraid of me. I have seen its true face. The streets are extended gutters, and the gutters are full of blood. And when the drains finally scab over, all the vermin will drown. The accumulated filth of all their sex and murder will foam up about their waists, and all the whores and politicians will look up and shout, "Save us!" And I'll look down and whisper, "No."
Yeah, I mean, a couple things there with that before you even get into it, because I'm sure you got a lot to say. Like, bro, this is like, unless you're ready to lock into this story, bro, you read that shit and you're like, this is either for you or it's not, like off the rib. And shout out to Alan Moore. I mean, this dude is like a poet with a lot of the things that he does in here. Truly a poet.
It's such good writing.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're as hype on this as I am.
Absolutely.
And it's also, to be clear, this is Rorschach's character, right? It's not like what I just read sounds crazy. That's not the point of the whole book. That's the point of Rorschach.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's really cool about the structure of the story, I guess I'll spoil just a structural thing. A lot of the main characters are sort of going to get a dedicated chapter that kind of fills in their backstory.
Gotcha.
We've already read ahead a little bit, and the next chapter 4, what we're going to talk about next episode, is a lot of Dr. Manhattan's origin. We see how he became Dr. Manhattan, or what Dr. Manhattan even is, right? We get the same thing for Rorschach. There's like a Rorschach chapter.
Crazy.
We get all these different characters. We sort of, it fills in the blanks. But yeah, that's one of the... Rorschach is such an interesting character where if you think about Batman, like all of these, most conventional heroes, they like love the city so much. Like they love the people. It's all about
he's
saving
like, man,
people.
This shit sucks.
He's literally...
I hate him, and I'm saving him kind of anyway.
Yeah. No, but save them. I mean, this literally on the third panel of the book, it's them looking up from the accumulated filth of all their sex and murder, and they're going to ask him to save them. And he's going to whisper, no. Edgelord, crazy.
Edgelord.
It's such an interesting thing for us to try to uncover what his deal is. Why all he wants to do is punish evil, but he sees evil everywhere. He really he talks about the people of the city with such disdain, such disgust. The people that he treats Dan and his friends really respectfully. I mean, he breaks into their homes and eats beans out of their kitchen or whatever,
Right.
but
Takes all their sugar cubes.
right. When he sees Dan is saying, "Hey, we had some great days. We had some great times back in the day." And Rorschach's like, "Yeah, I loved working with you. We did a lot of good."
Right.
They're like, you can see they actually have a friendship.
Yeah.
You can see
these are the only people he even like seemingly like remotely respects.
Right. The other his fellow vigilantes,
costumed adventurers.
Yes, I mean that's just one. I just wanted to read. That's a really iconic, iconic opening line, and all of Rorschach's. It's sort of a treat whenever we get the Rorschach journal entries because they're both just fascinating. Rorschach is such a freaky guy, and it's also like what you said. It's just great writing. Like the prose is just genuinely top tier.
Yeah,
there's not a lot of just boom, bam, pow, how cool. It is like this is a literary achievement.
Yep, I completely agree. And I think it's like it's such a. I mean, there are a lot of different things that I think should be valued in the same way. Like we talked about, I think in one of our like earlier episodes about how comics are seen as this like in some cases like childish or like whatever else, right? But it's like this is like a very like standout example, but it is a beautiful example of like this is such a amazing storytelling medium that is simply different than rather than less than reading a book, whatever else. And the beauty of this too is that we get comic and then we also get regular book. I mean, it goes from like I'm thinking about, when I was like reading this, whatever else, right? Like comic book reading, obviously there's a lot of intentional stuff and beautiful things in here. And like you talked about, really great prose, but then we don't only get that. At the end of a bunch of these chapters, we're reading a real book with long ass, pages and whatever else, right? We're going from reading like 20, 30 words a page to reading like 200, 300, whatever else.
And what's so cool too is those book entries of the excerpts of Under the Hood, Hollis Mason. The way it's presented to us in the book is as if like there's like a fake paperclip on it, and the way it's formatted very intentionally so that it feels like an actual cutout of another novel that exists within this world. And it, the first time it pops up, it literally shows paper clipped on a note that says, "We present here excerpts from Hollis Mason's autobiography Under the Hood, leading up to the time when he became the mass adventurer Night Owl, reprinted with permission from the author."
Right. Yeah. So it's real. It's supposed to be real.
It's immersive.
It's incredibly. That's actually a great word that I feel like we just have not used yet, but it is like very immersive. You have these. You're like in the story, obviously experiencing the story, and then you're like literally like you're part of the world. You're reading this excerpt from this book that the book only exists within that world, right? And you're kind of again getting these multi-layered experiences that are happening here.
Yeah. So I mean, some of the big themes we've been talking about, just to try to summarize up our whole discussion here. We've talked a lot about like moral ambiguity. Heroism, like if there's real heroism, what that even looks like. The death of idealism, same thing. Hollis Mason. Oh, I set out to be the Night Owl because I wanted to help people.
I was going to be a good guy and help people and whatever else, and then we ended up with people like the comedian and
even he self-admitted was like people said we were fascists and sex freaks and
he was like, yeah,
probably, yeah. He's
said,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've got like detachment. Everybody's all isolated. Everyone is traumatized. Dr. Manhattan is struggling to relate to anything. His peers,
not just anybody, but anything.
It's also a lot talking about control and surveillance. Rorschach is super paranoid. He's obsessed with this plot to kill former heroes. Is he just going crazy? Is he onto something?
They also play part in that surveillance as well as their vigilante, but specifically I guess with like the comedian and like Night Owl in one of the scenes that we see where
Right.
they're like breaking up protests and whatever else, right?
And it's all, it's also, there's all the Cold War.
The constant.
Right. This is also, when this came out, it's interesting for us because this is something we have an understanding of in terms of, we know about what the Cold War was like, but we don't remember what it felt like. Like when this book was published, a lot of, we grew up doing school shooting drills.
Right.
A couple generations ago, they grew up doing, we're about to get nuked, get under the desk so you feel better about it. Type drills.
For real.
So all of this type of stuff is like, it feels a little bit of a previous era.
Yeah.
Obviously one of the things that Antonio brought up in the beginning of our conversation that we've been trying to pull back into is all the different ways that this book relates to the current events that we're living through now. But that whole, the book is very much Cold War, nuclear Holocaust fears.
Yeah, that's always going on in the background. I mean, you're seeing like, obviously Dr. Manhattan, when his situation goes on and they think that he's like causing cancer or whatever else, right? They're putting up these hazard signals, whatever else on his door. You see, I can't remember exactly. I think it was maybe even the scene with, or the panels with the kid and the newspaper guy, but they're like building a fallout. Like it's like you're seeing like workers in the background, like building a fallout shelter
for sure,
like behind them. And I mean, even like, it's like the beginning. Yeah, literally the beginning of chapter 3 is exactly that. It just starts on the fallout shelter. So you have this constant pulse in the background of nuclear warfare, Cold War, everything like that going on.
Yeah, absolutely. We also, so we can, what do I say other than, yeah, absolutely? Like it just sounds ridiculous.
You say,
well done, Antonio.
You're so fucking right, bro.
That was well put, Antonio. You were so right.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. Of course. Killer analysis, bro.
Thanks. Same to you.
So we can also run through quickly just the characters, our cast of characters. Obviously, we've touched on a bunch of them, somewhat hectically. I hope in the edit this is all going to be fairly easy for people to follow. Those listeners who hopefully have read some of Watchmen, those who haven't, we want it to sort of make somewhat sense to everybody. So we'll just quickly run through. We've got Rorschach, obviously. Mm-hmm. He's our one of our main protagonists, super extreme, ruthless, driven, uncompromising. We've got Dan, or Night Owl 2. He's the retired, sort of schlubby, kind guy.
Right, Night Owl, the sequel, yeah.
Yep, he always pulls up weekly visits. Our Hollis Mason, Night Owl number 1. Our OG, we get to read excerpts of his autobiography. He's the kindly, older generation auto mechanic cop hero guy. He sort of represents early America stuff. Yeah.
Did we not talk? Is that in this chat? Is that in these chapters?
What,
his backstory?
The tragedy, his backstory?
Oh, okay.
Let's jump in, man.
All right. This maybe will get edited somewhere else. But
no, it'll stay right here. This is our wrap up. Yeah. Let's jump in.
Okay, let's run through the characters first.
The tragedy
and then I'm
of
come back
his.
So we're talking about Dan. We're talking about obviously his relationship with Hollis Mason. We've got Laurie Uspech, who's Silk Spectre 2. We also obviously talked about
her mom.
Yeah, her
Silk
mom
Spectre
as well.
number 1.
Yep. We also obviously have Dr. Manhattan, inhuman, alien-looking guy, blue, everything like that. We have the comedian Edward Blake, who's our resident super psychopath, who has the breakdown while talking to his old enemy. He is a really polarizing figure for even the people that worked with him. And then I guess lastly, for the time being, that we have Adrian Veidt, who is Ozymandias, who's this, he's the guy who's very, very rich, polished, the one who was trying to kind of get them all together in the beginning to be like a whole crew and whatever else, right? And then that didn't end up happening.
He's one of the like brains behind the operations, and he did very well for himself. He's like supposedly the smartest guy on earth.
Yeah, exactly.
That's his MO.
Exactly. All right, but so let's talk about real quick. Probably Hollis Mason's probably one of my favorite little excerpts. I think this is such like a crazy like short story that gets put in here. But one of the flashbacks that Hollis Mason kind of talks about with his history growing up and kind of some of the things that it's such good writing.
It's such good
getting
writing.
into this like thing, because he's basically like, how do I start this book? This is actually, I think so. This is at the end of chapter 1, but he's like, how do I start this book? The woman at the grocery store, she has written countless romantic novels. And what does she say, Ben?
She says, start off with the saddest thing you can think of and get the audience's sympathies on your side. After that, believe me, it's a walk. So yeah, he starts off with the saddest thing he can think of, which is the story.
Well, the saddest thing he can think of is what is that song actually called?
The Ride of the Ride of the Valkyries,
right?
Just
Right. And so we get this amazing little short story where it basically talks about growing up. He's working in a mechanic shop.
His dad
is
brought
a farmer
his family
boy
away
originally.
from Montana. His grandpa was like, "No, son, you got to stay in Montana.
It's going to be terrible over there in New York.
The cities are where them liberals are."
Yeah, or where them. It's the cities are where the sinners.
The communist
sinners. Yeah, that's where they're at. And so they go to New York, and what ends up happening is Hollis Mason starts work and his father as well.
Dad's garage. Yeah,
he's working in. It's not even his dad's garage. He's working in this garage that's owned by. What is this guy's name?
It's Vernon. Vernon's Auto Repair.
Vernon's Auto Repair. So he's working under this guy. He and his dad are working under this guy, Vernon. There's this great photo in there. And you get this whole backstory of...
There's Mo Vernon and Fred
Vernon.
Motts. Mo Vernon's the one.
Mo Vernon is the guy who's
the
story's about. But you get this whole backstory on Mo Vernon, who he is this guy who like owns the shop. He is always like blasting music, and one of the interesting things about him is that he has this like drawer of like all these like
weird sex jokes.
Yeah, weird sex joke things. Like, we'll get into it, but basically, like, you kind of go through the story where one day, Mo Vernon is like sitting in his office and
blasting Ride of the Valkyries.
Right, he's blasting music. And he knows that the male guy is coming in, and so he puts on this like fake foam boobs, right?
Yep.
And they're weird. Like pink, like and whatever else. Yeah, he's like a weird, like eccentric, goofy kind of guy.
He's just a goofy guy.
Yeah, and then the male guy comes in, right, and like Mo Vernon thinks this stuff is obviously funny. The male guy like kind of like sheepishly laughs and whatever else, but the note that the male guy hands to him. He opens it up and he basically ends up learning that his wife of however many years has been cheating on him with like the head mechanic of the thing that he's running right now for the last like 2 years.
Yep. And she said, not only that, she says, I've taken all our money and dipped with him.
Yeah. Literally we've left and whatever else. And then the moment that this ends up kind of culminating in, and you're going to have to read it for me, but the quote basically, he bursts out of his office wearing the pink foam fake breast things with what is it? Basically the Rise of the Valkyries, whatever else, playing in the background. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. And what does he say?
He says, Fred Motts has had carnal knowledge of my wife, Beatrice, for the past 2 years. He stood there in the wake of his announcement, tears rolling down over his multiple chins to soak into the pink foam rubber of his bosom, making tiny heaving sounds in his chest. Everyone starts laughing.
This guy's crying after receiving probably the most traumatizing news of his life.
And everyone at work, it's like the whole community there. It's like one of the head mechanic has stolen his wife and all his money.
And they just start dying laughing because of this scene. Like, it's like this dude is like wearing like fake breasts, says the most insane like first sentence, Rise of Valkyries or whatever it's called, is playing in the background. And everybody starts laughing. And I think it's like 30 minutes later they go and like somebody like apologizes to him and whatever else. And then that night he is in the mechanic shop. Mo Vernon is in the mechanic shop late and basically reroutes the exhaust pipe of one of the cars to inside the car, gets in the car, and basically kills himself through is that carbon monoxide poisoning?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. So he commits suicide. And then it says his brother takes over the business and eventually ends
rehires that mechanic, bro. And so that's
the
why
world is no one cares, bro. It's a dog eat dog
world, and that's why Hollis Mason says that Is it the Rise of the Valkyries?
The Ride. Yeah, he
The
says,
Ride of
and
the
that's
Valkyries.
why the Ride of the Valkyries is the saddest thing I can think of, even though it's somebody else's tragedy than my own. I was there, and I laughed along with all the rest, and I guess that makes me part of the story too. He goes on to say, now if Denise's theory is correct, I should have your full sympathy, and the rest will be a walk. So maybe it's safe to tell you about the stuff you probably bought this book to read about. Maybe it's safe to tell you why I'm crazier than Mo Vernon ever was. I didn't have a drawer full of erotic novelties, but I guess I had my own individual quirks. And although I've never worn a set of false bosoms in my life, I've stood there dressed in something just as strange, with tears in my eyes, while people died laughing.
Yeah. That's like one of my favorite parts. It's crazy that I didn't even remember to say that in the beginning, but like, that's one of like because it's like, again, this is not even like part of the quote unquote like main plot. This is like backstory to the backstory, and we're getting that much of a like experience with that writing and whatever else.
And it's crazy to think about, and it also reflects it. It puts the whole how we're supposed to be thinking about these superheroes, quote unquote superheroes.
Right. Yep. Quote unquote heroes.
Dudes in spandex beating the shit out of each other.
Yeah.
And killing each other.
Yeah.
It's like life and death. Mo Vernon dies, and it's like it's showing that this scenario, this ridiculous scenario, is inherently funny. Like it's so goofy. This guy, it's inherently funny. It can also be inherently tragic.
Well, I mean,
also
classic drama,
yeah.
comedy and tragedy, two sides of the same coin, right?
That's and life and death.
Yeah.
And life and death. People really die. Real stakes. This guy died. It was funny, and that also leads into the comedian.
Yep.
Seeing everything's a sick joke.
Yep.
How do you respond to that? What's your response to, some people kill themselves.
Do you rise above it? Do you kind of like do what the comedian did and kind of like wallow in it, or do you remove yourself from it and kill yourself like Mo Vernon?
Or do you try to be, Hollis Mason or whatever?
Yeah.
Night Owl ~1.
Yeah.
Try to go be a hero and help people in spandex or whatever.
Exactly. So
I agree with you. That was one of the things that I had forgot about from my original read, and then in rereading, I was just blown away by that as well.
Yeah, what a great one. Well, anyway, it's a
great place to wrap up.
Yeah, that's a great place to wrap up. This has been the first 3 issues of Watchmen. We look forward to getting into the next 3 or 4. We'll decide with you guys next time. I
think 3 or 4 at a time. We'll see what makes sense where to stop. And we'll, later on down the line, maybe we'll be posting on Instagram which chapters we're going to read.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much for joining us. Bro, dude, I'm hyped to be fucking reading this.
Yes.
I'm hyped to be rereading it. I'm hyped to be talking about it with you.
This is great.
I'm glad you are enjoying it and, taking so much out of it.
Yeah. What a great time.
All right, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Later.
Be safe out there.
Peace.
Banger. Wow. I'm so happy that fucking came up at the end. I cannot believe I almost